Welcome to the Lookout Cookout, celebrating the history, heritage, people, and places of the Cape Lookout area of North Carolina.
This episode of the Lookout Cookout is brought to you by Zion Consulting, offering services in graphic and website design, software development, and business consulting. Want to take your business to the next level? Visit zioncg.com and let Zion Consulting go the extra mile for you. Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at the Lookout Cookout. I'm Opie.
I'm Levi.
We appreciate you guys stopping to listen to us. This week we talked to our good friend Captain Mark. He's got incredible stories to tell us. I'm really excited. I know we've talked to him, before off the air. I don't want to give too much away that we might come across.
Yeah, there's a lot of good twists and turns that you don't want to give away.
Long story short, we got a young man from was it Bronx? I know he's from New York.
Long Island.
From Long Island, yeah. That's right. Got in a boat, sailed the 7 seas. He's got some rad stories to tell between point A and point B. He's going to share that stuff with us. So
pretty literally sailed the 7 seas.
Yeah, literally. I don't want to give too much away because there might be some stuff that I don't know about that he's going to talk.
I think we can just say, he's crossed the Atlantic multiple times via boat, not by plane like most people.
Not the easy way that everyone else is done.
He ran a charter sailing business down in the Bahamas for probably 10 or 15 years, or if not more. Long 20-year career in the Air Force. Like he's had a very wildly varied
a rad
life.
Dude.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun, guys. We appreciate you joining us. We got a few things to get to before that, so you guys stay tuned. But before we get around to talking to Captain Mark, I think Levi's got some recipes he's been cooking up this week. He's gonna tell us how things have been going. About some fish. Or
Cap Mark has inspired me. I've been tuna'd and shrimped out.
I like the sound of that.
Which is not a bad thing to be.
No, there's a lot worse things in life. So stay tuned after this quick message from one of our local sponsors. We'll get to that recipe, and then you guys stay tuned. We'll be talking to Captain Mark after all that. Today's episode of the Lookout Cookout is brought to you by Lookout Adventures. If you're looking for a less crowded fishing excursion, if you want to hop from one of the necks to the Outer Banks' most beautiful barrier islands, stay on the boat for a personalized dolphin watch, or maybe just you want to book a private sunset cruise for you and that special someone, let Lookout Adventures be your guide. With many full and half-day options to choose from, there's an adventure waiting for everyone. For pricing, gift certificates, and more information, visit lookoutadventures.com.
So, Opie, we had a chat the other day with our good friend Captain Mark, and I was thinking the entire time during that interview. It was a long interview. It was a couple hours long, but you know what I could not get off of my mind?
What's that?
Seafood. Like, that's all I could think of the entire time.
Well, that's one of the things that they ate everywhere when you're living on a boat, like wherever they were at. It was simple to get a meal, just throw the line over.
Yeah, that's what he talked about. Like, he talked about his sailing companion, like literally just throwing a line, like going into dock, throwing a line over, and just catching tuna left and right. Like literally enough that they couldn't even take it all with them. Like,
I'm a little jealous of the convenience and the story behind all that.
So after hearing all that, I was like, I have to have some tuna. So I went online and I found a couple of different recipes, but I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to grill something, I want it to be as simple as possible. I'm not big on like marinating and like a bunch of, marinades that take like 10 or 15.
Get it on there, get it cooked, get it in your belly.
Exactly. That's my idea. So I found a recipe that I've used in the past, or a version of it. But basically, you take some tuna steaks, like 1 to 2 inches thick. And for us, it's just me and my wife, so it just needed 2. You throw them into a Ziploc bag with some olive oil, and you can throw other stuff in there like herbs or garlic or whatever. But I just do it simple. I'm a purist. Minimalist. I just want it as done quickly as possible.
If you could eat it raw, you'd do it. I'm with you.
Exactly. And that's the thing about cooking tuna too, is you're not cooking it very far past raw, because it dries out so quick.
You don't want to overdo it.
Yeah. So you throw it into, a Ziploc bag or a zip top bag if you don't want to be brand specific, and throw it in there with a couple.
Plug.
Yeah. Throw it in there with a couple of teaspoons of olive oil. Throw it into the fridge for about an hour. And for me, if I'm grilling, and I'm grilling on a charcoal grill, so that takes a little while to get set up. So pretty much I just throw it into the bag, put it in the fridge just before I start grilling. Because if you're doing a gas grill, you're pretty much immediate. But if you're cooking on a gas grill, you're kind of spoiled anyway. So
QR Hank Hill propane accessories.
So I throw it all into the fridge, in the Ziploc bag, and then I go out and start messing with the grill, which the last couple of days has been challenging around this area because it has been a little bit chilly the last few days in Carteret County.
It's chore just to get out there and get it lit, and then on top of that, you're freezing your buns off the whole time you're out there.
Absolutely. I think when I was out there the other day, it was 17 degrees, and that's a little cold for grilling, but that's okay because I really wanted it. So get the charcoal lit. If you're doing a propane grill or gas grill, you want probably medium heat, which for me, that just means an amount of charcoal, a pile of it. So I get that lit, get it all started. You could also throw on, if you're doing charcoal, you can throw on some wood chips. I'm not a huge fan of wood chips, but you can do it.
Couple on there, get that nice little smoky flavor to it.
And if you do use wood chips, you want to soak them in the water first, because if you don't soak them first, they just basically explode in flames, which can be
that's
fun.
Another episode, another recipe entirely.
That's a whole different conversation. So I'm out there with the grill, got everything working. And then, of course, I'm very adamant about cleaning my grill. Like, I keep my grill grates clean all the time. But you want to make sure everything's clean, because anything that is on the grill grates before you start cooking is going to end up on the tuna by the time you're done. Yeah. And that may not be a good thing.
You don't want your tuna tasting like barbecue chicken from last week.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So once you get all that done, you want to oil your grill grates just real lightly. I usually just take a dish towel and put a little bit of olive oil on it and just wipe it down. And that seems to get the job done. So when you're ready to go, pull your tuna out the fridge, do a little salt and pepper on top on both sides, and you can do other stuff there too. I've seen some people do lemon salt, which is pretty good.
Lemon salt,
I use lemon juice at the end, so probably be about the same thing. So you do that, and you throw it on the grill. Depending on the tuna cut, you're looking at probably about 3 to 5 minutes aside. Only flipping once, ideally, and no squeezing down, no pressing it with the spatula.
All you dingbatters listening up, you need to take some notes to the locals. We know how to cook some fish.
Absolutely. So you're looking, 3 to 5 minutes aside, but really what you're looking for, I think, is about 120 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what you want your internal temperature to be. And whenever I'm grilling, pieces of meat that can be dangerous if they're undercooked, I always use, a thermometer. I have one of those big probe thermometers that you stick in the side.
There you go. It's a fine line between undercooked and,
dangerous.
You don't want to be eating a piece of charcoal either, but
absolutely. And that's the thing with tuna too, is if you overcook it even by a few degrees, it's pretty much inedible. You basically might as well just buy canned tuna at that point.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, I mean, canned tuna has its place, but not when you're trying to grill a big steak. So once you do that, grill 3 to 5 minutes aside, aim for about 125 degrees. You pull it off, put it on a plate. Throw on some, lemon or lime juice. I've even seen orange juice done and some orange zest on top.
Doesn't sound bad.
Pretty much anything citrusy is good. And, do a little side of maybe some steamed broccoli, little rice pilaf. It's delicious. And you're looking at, counting setup time for the grill, you're looking at 45 minutes
pretty
for
much,
everything.
Sounds like.
So that's what I did the other day. Me and my wife enjoyed that. And
go ahead.
Pretty fast and easy.
All right, so I'm coming over tomorrow. We can retry this?
About that. I may have only...
You'll get back to me.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to if you want to bring the tuna. You bring the tuna, I'll grill it.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Anybody listening to, we'll have this recipe a little directly on the website. We'll get it up so you guys can just copy the recipe. And
we'll throw up a link and a little description of everything. So that'll be up there at thelookoutcookout.com.
Check it out, guys. Tell us how it goes.
This episode of The Lookout Cookout is brought to you by Above It All Studios, covering all of your video recording and photography needs, offering studio portraits, on-location shooting, HD aerial drone videography, and much more. Book them for your next family reunion when everyone's together. Schedule an engagement photo shoot to capture that special moment forever. Visit AboveItAllStudios.com for more details. So, everybody, we'd like to thank Captain Mark for joining us on the show today. He's got a lot of great stories, some of which we've already heard in the past, but we don't mind hearing them again. And I really think our listeners out there are going to enjoy all the things Mark has to say. What do you think, Ope?
It's really a pleasure, and we appreciate, again, having Mark here. We were talking earlier about some of the things you've done, just to kind of familiarize everybody with where Mark's coming from. He's done so many things, starting out as a young man in New York, going through a whole business, traveling the world, going all over the place, owning multiple boats and different things, being in and out all over the Outer Banks area. The thing that I thought was the strangest about this whole story and how it started, though, is that if I'm not mistaken, you started your career in the military. Was it the Air Force before you even got to the boat stuff? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That seems kind of like polar opposite to me, like going from a life in planes to a life in boats. So like how did you decide to start first in the Air Force and start with planes? Like what got you into that initially?
Well, it really goes back to a time when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I got interested in aviation, even though I was living on Long Island and all my friends were into boating. There's something about the dynamics of an aircraft that fascinated me. I recall writing to major manufacturers at 11 years old asking for poster board pictures, and they accommodated me. They were very sweet about it. And I had those posted all around my bedroom. And one morning I awoke to a realization. You could buy these little balsa wood gliders. They're flat, and you slide the wing in elongation and your tail, and have a little lead weight in the front, and you could throw it, and it would fly. And by moving the wing forward or aft, you could cause it to climb or dive, but you couldn't make it turn. So in one of these waking moments when you're not quite awake and you're not quite asleep, your brain seems to solve problems that you've been working on all night. And what happened in this case was I decided if I could bend the wing on one side up and the other side down, it would turn. And I went to the so-called stationery store very close to my home and bought one of those 10-cent gliders. And I wetted the wing, and I ran out of the store all excited, and I threw the airplane, and I ran smack into an automobile and knocked myself to the ground. and the young fellow driving the car, I thought it was an old man. He was probably 21, 22 years old. And he's saying, are you okay, kid? Are you okay? And I said, did it turn? Did it turn? And that was an awakening for me. I realized that aviation was going to be a part of my life. And, of course, I realized that I invented ailerons, but, of course, the Wright brothers in 1903 at Kitty Hawk had done that. And that's how they had their first powered flight, and they were able to do something more than go up and down by bending the trailing edge of the wing. So, but I knew I invented it, not the Wright brothers.
Well, they weren't 11 years old anyway, so we wouldn't count them.
That's right. And who were they anyway? But it's part of the heritage of North Carolina, the story of flight and aviation and the tremendous competition with the French. And the Wright brothers were 3 minutes ahead of everybody else. So pretty cool. But what got me into boating, actually, was all of the places that the Air Force sent me. Guam, Hawaii, the Philippines, Okinawa, Taiwan, Iceland, all islands. So I grew up on an island, and then I was, for many, many, many years, living in the Far East and on islands. And you start to realize that you're drawn down to the sea, even though you're heavily involved in aviation, and you go down to the shore, go down to the harbor, and you realize that the boats look like boats, and they are similar, but they're a little bit different than Long Island. And seawalls and ramps and marina equipment is very similar, but it's different. It's modified to that weather system and tidal systems that prevail on the island that I'm at. And finally, I was stationed in Iceland, and the Air Force sent me to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. What a shock. I thought, I was there about 2 weeks, and I was starting to yearn for the ocean. And a sergeant that I knew had said, well, the Sea of Cortez is just a 3-hour drive from Phoenix. The Bay of California is another way that it's known. And so my wife and I jumped in this little red Corvette, and we went down and to Puerto Penasco, Rocky Point, which is 60 miles south of the American border. And there's the beautiful Sea of Cortez and white rolling sand dunes and beautiful, beautiful. And we were up on a bluff in the car looking over a cliff, and what I didn't know was the proper name, which was regatta. There was a Hobie Cat regatta going on. And I said to Patsy, that's a stupid sport. They go 50 yards and capsize. And you get, refloat the boat and go and do it again. And it just haunted me that the sail in its vertical configuration is a wing. And I realized that they were shaping that wing and creating lift, which was translated into thrust, and I went forward. And about 2 weeks later, I bought one.
Wow.
That's how I got into sailing. And I hot-rodded around with my daughter and son down at Rocky Point. We'd go down there every weekend we could possibly get down there. The kids loved it because of the sand dunes and the freedom that they would be able to play with a lot of other kids, just having a great time. So it was a great family thing and activity that we all enjoyed, and it involved camping on the beach. And sometimes it'd be races, and I wasn't a participant. I was just a loner. After joining the Air Force, I decided I wouldn't join anything else ever again. But there was Fleet 10 out of Tucson and Fleet 8 out of Phoenix, and I got talked into going to a couple of meetings, and then I started racing, and I realized I wasn't very good at this. I thought I was pretty good. I could fly a hull and get out in the trapeze and just hot dog around, enjoying it, the speed and elegance of a Hobie Cat or a Prindle Cat. But when I started racing, they put, there was an A fleet, a B fleet, and a C fleet, and the C fleet was for novices, and the power that be in the club put me in C fleet, and I couldn't even get in the top four racing. I thought I was good, as I said before, but I wasn't. And as boats went flying past me, I could see how they would set the sail out or different configurations to go faster, and I was learning by observing. But that's pretty much the genesis. That's pretty much what got me into sailing. I was still on active duty in the Air Force, and living in Phoenix in the Sonoran Desert, and that's where I learned to sail, ironically.
That's pretty interesting that you jump all around the globe and get stationed on islands all over the world, and then you finally, it kind of grabs hold of you in the desert.
Yeah, it's really ironic, but almost laughable. But you come to gain some knowledge. You find out that allegedly there are more registered boats in Arizona than per capita than any other state, and it's because of the reservoir systems. Lake Powell, Lake Mead, Lake Havasu City, Canyon, Lake Saguaro, Lake Roosevelt. Lake Pleasant is really where I learned to sail. I called it Lake Unpleasant because the shoreline is all rocky, desertscape. But yeah, that's pretty much my beginnings. And then a little later, I learned that you could actually live on a boat. I would have lived on an airplane, but who does that, But I thought I was starting to read some articles in a publication called Multi-Hulls, and in those days it was more or less a mimeograph sheet, 4 or 5 pages stapled together, and the August edition always came in December. But it was in 3 parts, and one part would be how to build a cruising catamaran, a liveaboard blue water cruising catamaran, because there was really only one production catamaran company in the world, and that was in England. It was called Prout, Prout, two twin brothers put a couple of kayaks together and raced around the Thames. They went on to be a major boat builder. And so you would read a little bit. I had a little bit of interest in that, but not much. My interest was another section of the magazine that talked about race results for Prindle cats, Hobie cats, nationally and internationally. And really getting into the racing thing takes a lot of devotion and a lot of time. And then the third section of Multi-Hull magazine was about liveaboard cruising people. And another awakening. They live on these things and they cruise. And there was an article written by a lady, multiple articles. She was English. Her and her husband lived in a landlocked part of England, and they wanted to move down to, say, Brighton, and lived near the water. And they went down. They sold their house, and they had a taxi service with a Mercedes, and they moved down to Brighton, and they found out they couldn't afford anything on the shoreline. It was just too expensive. So they bought a Prout catamaran, a Quest 33, and they set about, they knew nothing about boats. They sailed down to the Channel Islands, Jersey and Guernsey, and they went down the coast of Spain and Portugal and into Gibraltar. And that was their first article. I thought, holy cow, that's amazing. These are very brave people. Can you imagine sailing those distances and not knowing how? And they also had no money. And when they got into Jib, the mainsail had blown out and the Jenny had blown out. And they were contributors to the Prout magazine, the Owners magazine. And anyway, Prout gave them a couple of new sails. The story goes on over a couple of year period, and you come to find out that they had two mentally challenged children that lived on that Quest 33 with them, their children. And they had, they were both lab techs, and they would go to an island and go to work for 90 days and get what they called freedom chips, which was more money to go do more cruising. They went completely around the world. They actually went into Beaufort near the end of their trip and on their way up to Annapolis, where they sold their boat and flew back to England after a 5-year world cruise. Well, that titillated me. That excited me. I ended up, I was at that point a single dad, and my daughter had already graduated and gone off to college. And my son graduated, and I sold my house in Phoenix, having retired from the Air Force. And I bought a Quest 33 Prout. And so that kind of started my liveaboard cruising life. I learned how to sail. I knew how to sail, but I didn't know what a motor was, a diesel, an anchor, dock lines, water makers, or navigational systems that are relative to maritime use. I knew navigation from flying, but it's a different world on the water. And so I bought it in Gulf Breeze, Florida, in the Panhandle, almost the western part of the state. The westernmost part of the state, and learned and sailed, met a couple. I think the sailing thing, the biggest part of it, is the memories of the people that you've met. The journeys, the passage making, and the adventure and excitement of that are in the moment and beautiful. But what really rocks your memory is the people you meet along the way. And those memories stay with me pretty fresh. I recall when I bought the Quest, which was called 9 Lives, people with catamarans in the early movement, multi-hull movement times, would put feline in, like Catitude, 9 Lives, that sort of thing. So anyway, I had to go in the boatyard the day after I bought the boat. There were things that needed to be done to it. And I met a couple. And at that time, I had a girlfriend sailing with me. And Heather Lane, a Scottish girl who was a nurse. And she kind of chucked it all and said, yeah, I'll go sail with you, foolish girl. Anyway, we're in the boatyard, and Heather met a girl, and she was in a wheelchair. And they had built a boat at that marina, boatyard rather, her and her husband, a lovely couple, and they knew everything. They just knew everything, and we knew nothing. So I had to make a promise or a pledge that we wouldn't go offshore for a year or more until I learned the ropes. And their boat was being splashed the same day my boat was being splashed, and they said, where are you going? I said, I kind of don't know. I'm going to hang around the shoreline. And they said, well, come and go with us to the Dominican Republic. And I said, where is that? And they said, well, it's right next to Puerto Rico. I think, yeah, maybe something smaller, you know. But we followed them. It was late in the afternoon, and my son was on board at the time. So Heather, myself, and my son Christopher start following our new friends, and they went diagonally across the Gulf of Mexico to the Anclote River near Newport Richey, Florida. And I had a new autopilot in the box, and I had a Loran C for navigation in the box. So I said to my son and Heather, just steer the boat, follow that boat in front of us, and I'll get this Loran going so we know where we are. So there I am reading instructions and installing Loran, and after about 4 hours, I know where we are. And it was really it was quite a thrill. And they looked at me like, yeah, but we're tired of steering this boat. And so another 4 hours, and I had the autopilot up and running. And we went into the Anclote River, which was, to me, having lived in Phoenix for such a long time, it was like a jungle of vegetation, the beauty, the green, and pelicans, air dumping on your boat. And it was just splendid. It was everything I thought it would be. The kind of a dream that I had.
So you went from the idea of, I'm going to get a boat and stay near shore, figure out the ropes and how to sail it, to literally in the same breath going all the way to Puerto Rico.
Right.
Yeah, just sounds crazy to me. I wouldn't have the guts to do that.
No, absolutely not.
They were angry. Yeah, Chris and Heather were angry with me, but
but you kept their mind off it by making them do all the work. So that's smart.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was cooking and fishing. Actually, Heather proved to be quite the navigator and also quite the fisher girl. She caught so many fish every time we went into a fuel dock. She would make a gift to whoever was there, the dock master, dock mistress, and give them tuna or whatever she caught. It was more than we could possibly eat anyway. She was always fishing. So, yeah, it was good for all of us. And then the next challenge was the Florida Keys. And we kind of hung out in Key West, and you get impressions. I thought as we were going in there was a basin that was called Houseboat Row. And there were sailing vessels of all kinds that were more or less derelict. And people, young couples and young single guys and single girls were living on them with no power, no electricity, pretty much destitute. And they would work in bars and restaurants in Key West. And I thought, I have this dream. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I called Key West the harbor of broken dreams, because people would put what little money they could gather into their boat to make them seaworthy so they could continue their dream. But it looked like that wasn't going to happen. And I told Chris and Heather, we have to get out of here. It could be contagious, you know.
It's almost like a permanent rest stop.
Yeah, permanent rest stop. Exactly. So then Chris went back to school, and Heather and I thought, hey, let's go up the East Coast. Let's go to Manhattan. Let's go to the, New York Harbor. Let's go to Martha's Vineyard. And so we were on a very tight budget. I was living on an Air Force retirement, which was a precious little bit of money, but you could get by. It proved that you could live on $400 a month and live pretty comfortably on the boat, as long as you stayed out of the tiki bars and didn't go into marinas, because the marina would be whatever, $100 a night, something like that. And that's just the beginning, because then you're going to go down to the tiki and have a hamburger or something. Well, might as well have a couple of drinks. And
it's like one thing leads to the other, and before you know it, you spent your whole month's worth of savings.
Right. So liveaboard cruising people do things that prevent them from doing that, and they meet with each other. They row over to the other guy's boat, and they're invited on board for drinks or beers or whatever, and they socialize that way instead of going to the tiki bar, which can be quite expensive. And you're always eating fish and clothing. You're not making any fashion statements, let's say. Shorts and T-shirts and bathing suits. And amongst us liveaboard cruisers, the joke is if it's going to be dinner on another person's boat, that's semi-formal, so you wear deck shoes. If it's formal, you wear socks.
I wish it was that easy around here.
Yeah, wish that was easy enough on land.
If you don't mind, I'm going to borrow that from my wife next time we have to go out. It's like, hey, I have socks on. I'm dressed up.
Yeah, I'm all formalized.
Exactly.
If you don't mind, Mark, just kind of jumping back a bit, I know, we know a little bit from talking to you before, and you mentioned briefly before you ended up in Arizona that you've been stationed on a lot of islands all over the world. You mentioned Okinawa, Iceland. Do you have a favorite place that you were stationed?
Maybe a least favorite.
Or least favorite, or do you just have, is there just a story or a memory that just sticks out to you from any of those places? Because it sounded like you had pretty fond memories of Iceland.
Yeah, I did. My son was born there. My daughter was born in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. But anyway, I guess if you look back in your lives, and people tend to look back and say, wow, that was great, or that wasn't good at all. Okinawa was my first overseas assignment, and I was a two-striper and probably about 18 years old. And I woke up every morning on Okinawa saying, this is wonderful. I didn't need to look back. I couldn't look back. But I didn't need history or time passage to look back fondly and say, that was a good memory. That was a good place. I woke up every morning in Okinawa saying, man, look at me. I can't believe I'm here. It was an island like Long Island. It's surrounded by water, but it was tropical. And the people were Japanese. Okinawa, the Isles of the Ryukyu, are located about 400 miles south of the main islands of Japan. I learned things. I snorkeled for the first time in my life, and it wasn't a popular American sport. It was little heard of, but which has some pretty good things. The Sea of the South China Sea, the fish weren't accustomed to seeing people, so it was a marvelous riot of thousands of fish when you went in snorkeling, and they weren't hesitant to come to you. It was just breathtaking. And I took private pilot ground school there at the Aero Club, and I recall getting a picture of my daughter Susan, and she was sitting up on her own for the first time, and I was taking a course in photography at the base hobby shop, photo shop, and I got this new photograph of Susan, and I was very proud of her, and I was kind of showing it off to, I can't recall if the guy who ran the shop was a lieutenant, I think, and he said, "Oh, that's wonderful. You know, there's an artist, an older gentleman here in town at Kadena that you can bring that picture to him and he'll paint it." And I said, "Oh, what a great idea." So I hopped on my Honda, which was the main means of transportation, Izetta motor scooters and Hondas and Yamahas, just tens of thousands of them. And I drove to the artist's studio, and I could speak a little bit of Japanese, but not much. And his niece was interpreting for us, and she said, "Baby-san, not interesting. Come back when older." That's what the artist said. And that's what the artist said. You know, in his mind, a baby's face has no character. It's just a baby's face.
Right.
And I thought, wait a minute. That's my daughter. So, yeah, if you were asking what's my favorite island, that's just an impossible question because it's always the last island you visited.
Sure.
And it's because of the adventure of exploring the new island, and the dance, the theater, the religion, the culture, the food, and it's just it takes your breath away. The first thing you want to do after a long passage is you want to get to town, you want to get to mingle and explore all these people and the clothing and the colors, the artwork is always different. A good example is in Hispaniola, in the Dominican Republic. That island is shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And if you look at the artwork in Haiti, it's vivid, bright colors, yellows and reds and greens. And if you look at the artwork in the Dominican Republic, it's boring. It's theirs. It's their culture. And it just comes out at you as a visitor. So there's much to sailing. There's much to hitting that slot where the boat is at its maximum performance and you're just enjoying it to the highest possible level. But it's after the passage, it's the excitement of that new island.
So for you, it sounds like it's more about the journey than the actual places to some degree or another. Like you just have fun getting there.
Yeah, it's constant adventure. Of course, the day-to-day routine on a boat is you never wonder what you're going to do tomorrow morning. You're going to be working on the boat.
It sounds like it could get pretty monotonous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's constant maintenance. There's these little pearls of wonder, though. You could be on Biscayne Bay at anchor and see the whole bay light up on an outgoing tide. With a full moon, the shrimp come to the surface in tens of millions. And you just sit on one of the stern steps of your catamaran with a flashlight and a scoop. And you shine the flashlight and scoop up all the shrimp you can possibly wish for.
Now where exactly was this at again? So I got some friends that would probably be interested in some shrimping for that.
Oh,
it's that easy.
It is that easy. Yeah. I'm just kind of rambling along here, fellas.
No, you're fine.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and bait you just a little bit because I've already heard a few things, and there might be another one that stands out more than you. But if you have a hard time putting a finger on a place that was kind of your favorite, you've got to have at least like one story, one something. I don't know what it is, but something I guess it's got to be appropriate for all the innocent little ears that are going to be listening to this. But there's got to be something that you don't have any legal ramifications or moral dilemmas in telling us this story. But there's got to be something that you can share with us. I know I've heard one in particular about something about some cigarettes and some vodka. I think it was in Iceland, I was told.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess the statute of limitations is expired on that, I'm sure.
We're all good. We're good then.
Yeah. I met the second day I was in Iceland. I went down to the local airport in Reykjavik, and amongst sailors, when you go to a dock and you don't own a boat, or you own a boat but you're interested in every boat, and that's called gel coat kicking. In aviation, it's tire kicking. So you go down the airport, you just look at aircraft. And I ran into a fellow named Stefan Arneson, who had a Cardinal, a Cessna Cardinal 177. And he was explaining to me that he was losing his medical because he had a heart murmur or something like that. Very interesting guy. He was in New York City with his wife Rosa, and they bought that Cardinal. Well, he flew it to Iceland. It's a single-engine aircraft with no fuel duration for a trip like that. So he took the seats out of the back of the airplane and put a 55-gallon drum in it. It's kind of crazy. And he flew, like to Goose Bay, Labrador, and Greenland, and then jumped across to the Azores, and then northwest towards Iceland. I mean, it's a nutty thing. And if you knew Stefan, it's a nutty thing. And Rosa, like all Icelandic women, are just stunning, beautiful, very feminine, very blonde, and beautiful women. And Rosa was one of those, and she didn't speak very much English. But the English she did speak, she got from television, and the television programming in Iceland at the time must have been about 1972. The TV is controlled by the government, and the government thinks it's bad for you, so it's only on for a couple hours a day. But she was watching these old movies, and if she would pick up words in English, and a man goes to light a woman's cigarette, and he says, "Light?" And can I give you a light? So Rosa's in Brooklyn, New York, with Stefan, and she's doing a roast, and the roast went on fire. So she ran down in the streets in Brooklyn, and she was yelling, "Light, light." Oh, very interesting. Anyway, Stefan and Rosa and my wife, Mike, or Michelle, became fast friends, and they got us things that the Icelanders definitely have some bad feelings towards Americans over the Vietnam conflict. And so when you go there as a military person, there's a lot of restrictions on you. You can't go to town unless you're wearing a Class A uniform. You can't go to town unless they search your car and pat you down, because they don't want you disturbing their economy by bringing food and things that you bought off the base at a very low price downtown. So you could have one pack of cigarettes open and one closed, one roll of film in your camera and one in your pocket. You had to be off the streets by 8 o'clock at night, and no one would rent you a car or a hotel room. But because of Stefan, we had a beautiful home. The Icelandic architecture is like stunningly beautiful, very modern. Stefan got us a really nice house and got us an orange Volkswagen bus. And the other military people I knew that I was stationed with, they could live in what we call White Ghetto 1, which is for sergeants, or White Ghetto 2, which was for officers and their wives. And here I am renting a pediatrician's home who was in Chicago doing a fellowship. Irish linens, beautiful, beautiful. But anyway, Stefan was a mover and a shaker, and he came to me and he said, we're going to start making American colonial things like grandfather clocks, magazine racks and things like that. And I said, Stefan, who's going to buy them? And he said, Icelanders, they'll buy them. Well, he was right. We started building grandfather clocks, school clocks, grandmother clocks, and you could take a piece of pine and distress it with a blowtorch and make a magazine rack, and they just scoop it up. So we did that for a while and making money. The Air Force never paid me enough, and I'm kind of living high. I'm flying to work every day in Stefan's airplane. That was a part of the deal I didn't mention or forgot to mention, but I was going to help him out, and he was going to help me out. He needed to make a couple of more payments on that aircraft to have it free and clear. And I didn't want to pay the going rate in those days was probably about $55 an hour. And so I got it for $25 an hour, and I leased it for a year. So I would fly to work from Reykjavik to Keflavik, the Naval Air Station there, NATO base. And it was kind of cool. I had a car, I had a house, I had my wife, Stefan came to me again, and he said, do you know Rocknoida? And I said, Rocky, you're talking about Rocky? And he said, yeah, well, she was the distribution gal who would control the BP trucks that came from Reykjavik, where they were loaded with fuel to bring to the airbase. And the cost of living in Iceland is just breathtaking, stunning. A little tiny can of peas in those days was somewhere around $3.
Wow. That's high by today's standards, much less back then.
Yeah. It's very, very, very expensive. That's why they didn't want contraband coming off the airbase and disturbing their population. The other reason is they didn't want the American GIs dating Icelanders, because that had happened during World War II with the British, and the British were asked to get off the island because they were marrying the Icelandic women and just deleting the population of females. So, but anyway, Stefan refreshed my memory about Rocknoida, and another statuesque, beautiful Icelander. They had made compartments in the DP truck that were sealed and separate from the fuel part, and you could order things from Sears, believe it or not, and they would deliver it to Iceland, and you could pick it up in the port of Reykjavik, and, power tools, that sort of thing, and it would go in that compartment, come on the airbase, and then the GI would take it off the base. Well, Stefan wanted to short-circuit all of that. The national pastime in Iceland is drinking vodka, and Russian vodka is the best. And they don't drink to socialize; they drink to get smashed in the quickest possible time. Anyway, he comes up with this bright idea that we'll take the Cardinal and land in Reykjavik, and the Russian fishermen would bring vodka, and we'd smuggle it. We'd put it in the aircraft. General aviation is a backbone of Iceland, or was. I don't know what it's like today. But you go into these little fjords over the glaciers, and bring in food and supplies, these people, for the people of those villages. So they are very loose on customs and immigration for general aviation aircraft. So he says, okay, we'll put a couple of cases of vodka and you can land in the lava field and smuggle cigarettes and vodka. Okay. You gotta be crazy. You can't land at night on a black lava field because you don't know if you're landing 20 feet above the runway or 20 feet under the runway. It's just an inkwell. So he says, okay, so we'll get Rosa and his 3 daughters with flashlights, and we'll set up a runway for you. And I said, wow, you got to be kidding me. So
by any means necessary.
By any means necessary. So I said, well, he had a handheld VHF radio, and of course I had one in the aircraft. So I said, I'll fly over the runway. So I flew over. I never saw any lights at all. So I made a turn, and I said, Stefan, there are no lights on down there. I can't land in there. And he's a pilot. You know, you can't land like that. So they had 3 cars. They lit up the landing area with their headlights and flashlights. And I landed.
Wow.
So that was interesting because we started to make quite a bit of money. And I think I was either a tech sergeant or a master sergeant at the time, still pretty young. And I left Iceland with about $32,000 in cash, which was, believe it or not, more than enough money to buy a house in Phoenix with a swimming pool.
Wow.
So, they restrict how much money a GI can take off out of the country to 200 U.S. They want the money to stay in Iceland. So I'm getting paid in krona, Danish krona, Italian lira, all kinds of currencies from all over the world. And as guys rotated back, I figured out that I need to do something with this money. So I'd go up to a guy and say, when are you rotating? And he said, I'm going back next week. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you $200 to take back for me. And
wow.
I'll give you $10 or whatever. So I don't know how many guys I did that with, but it was a lot. And
$200 at a time. It had to be more than a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then some of them you would say, can you take 1,000, you know. And so they were breaking the law for me. But, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories in Iceland. The savior there is like, I extended. In other words, it was a 12-year tour, a 12-month tour, and I stayed for 18 months. I was like, people would give their life to get off of Iceland early, and here I am maneuvering and wheeling and dealing to stay for an extra 6 months.
Well, you had a lot going on. You had a lot of balls in the air at that time.
Yeah. It was exciting. It was an exciting time.
Absolutely. It sounds like it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the wrong business after that story.
There was another story about Iceland that you might find interesting. You can delete it or use it or not use it. But
please go ahead.
Sorry?
No, please go right ahead.
Oh, okay. There's something called an accompanied tour or an unaccompanied tour. If the Air Force sends you to an isolated remote place, such as Iceland, then you get credit for an isolated remote tour, and they won't do that to you again for 5 years. So I didn't know if I was going to like Iceland, and I didn't know if my wife was going to like Iceland. So I said, I'll go up there first and take a look around, and if it's any good, then I don't want to stay there more than a year. And so I will pay for your transportation, and I'll get a house, and we'll not involve the U.S. Air Force in any way. And so that's exactly what I did. That's known as an unaccompanied tour, a non-command sponsored tour. So my son Christopher was born, and we had a christening party for him, and I invited a lot of guys that work with me, and a couple of the girls that work with me, and they came to my house, and I all of a sudden realized these people are going to be upset. I have food, I have a beautiful house, I have a car, and they're living in a barrack somewhere. Well, sure enough, this Navy chief who I invited reported me for having my wife there. So if you have an unaccompanied tour, your wife can be there for 90 days, but she can't be there for 91 days.
Huh.
Oh, wow.
Or you get no credit for the tour. So this chief reported me. I had to go, what they think, the captain's mast. This is a NATO base controlled by the U.S. Navy. So I went to the mast. I went to this hearing, and there was a lot of Navy officers and no one there representing me. I don't know what this is all about. I don't know Navy tradition and their code of justice or what. I don't know even know what I've done wrong. Anyway, they said, well, your wife can't be here. And I said, well, she's a civilian. Well, how long has she been here? And I said about 80 days. And she has to leave. I said, she's a civilian. I can't tell her anything, and neither can you. She's here on a visa. She has a legitimate passport. My son is a native of this country. He has citizenship in this country and in the United States. And they said, she needs to go. You need to tell her to leave. I said, would you go home and tell your wife to leave? Do you have enough power to tell your wife what to do?
If I tried, I know my wife would have a few choice words for me.
Yeah, same here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well, they would and should. So anyway, I went home and talked to my wife about it, and I talked to Stefan about it. And he said, well, a logbook is a legal document. And I said, yep, it sure is. He said, did they tell you how long she has to leave the country? And I said, no, she just has to leave the country. So he said, well, give your wife a Blue Nose special flight, and that is where you're going to take her into the Arctic Circle, or you take tourists, it's a Blue Nose special. It's a little trip in an airplane across over into the Arctic, and then, give them a little certificate to say you did it in the land of fire and ice, Iceland. So, but file a flight plan and ask for radar tracking, radar following, and make a radio call once you're in the Arctic Circle and out of Icelandic waters, and then come back and go through customs and log it in your logbook. So I did all of that, and I get called in again. So we understand your wife is still here. Well, yeah, she left, and now she's back. What do you mean she left? I said, well, she left the country. How did she do that? I said, in an aircraft, like, most people. And so they said, well, how can you prove that? And I said, well, I brought my logbook along with me, and you can check with the Keflavik and Reykjavik control towers that filed a flight plan. And I went through customs and immigration. So they were just...
They had to be livid.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were furious. They were furious. So I was on the ground crew of F-4 Phantoms at the time. And I was a crew chief, and my commanding officer, these guys who fly fighter airplanes are sharp as a razor, and he's a young man, a pretty young guy, and he was a commander. And he called, well, in the day, if you got called by your first sergeant, you're probably in some kind of trouble. But I'm being called by the commander.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so he said, "Hello, Sergeant. How are you?" And I said, "I'm just fine, sir." He's very accommodating, very polite. Have a seat. Have a seat. He said, "I understand you fly to work every day." I said, "Well, yeah, that's right." And he said, You're really pissing off a Navy chief because you're parking your airplane in his car spot."
Oh.
And I was doing that deliberately because the weather is very inclement. And that guy is the guy who turned me in. And when he talked to me about it, the chief, the Navy chief, I was the same rank he was. And he's just trying to pull rank on me. Anyway, he was really aggravated that I took his parking spot, and I just said, "Chief, I don't have any choice in the matter. Ground control tells me where to park, and I have to follow their the directions," which was a crock. I was just I tell ground control I like to park in 272, a spot. Sure, you're cleared to taxi for that. So my commanding officer is a pilot. He's no dummy. So he said, "Hey, listen, we get our food from the Navy. We get our fuel from the Navy. We get our liquid oxygen from the Navy. We get all of our spare parts from the Navy. Please don't park there anymore." Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What that goes to show is a Navy chief, an enlisted man, which would be a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, is very, very powerful. Their naval tradition goes way back, and the chief is a pretty powerful guy. And I was kind of pissing off the wrong man.
Yeah, no, regardless of what his rank was or anything, just the fact that who he was and where he stood, just kind of wrong place, wrong time for you, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So you asked about some memories about an island, and I had some very fond memories and lucrative memories of Iceland.
Absolutely.
And my son was born there.
Yeah, and that you definitely can't call that a small thing.
Yeah, and when you rotate, it was kind of interesting. When you left that, your squadron would give you a big plaque, and somebody drew beautiful pictures of the glaciers on it and volcanoes, and it's called the Land of Fire and Ice. And Sergeant and Mrs. Pomerank and Christopher survived the year in the Land of Fire and Ice. And it's kind of neat. I don't know whatever happened to that. I wish I had it.
So with all that being said, I really hate to do it. I'm just enjoying these stories so much, but there's
Absolutely.
so much more to talk about.
There really is. I mean, we've covered all of this, Mark's time in the Air Force and being in Iceland and Okinawa and all of that, and we haven't even got to him crossing the Atlantic multiple times, starting a charter boat
We still have a bunch of
business.
boat stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
I don't want to give it away, Mark, but
Yeah, we've barely even covered the sailing portion of it, and that's the entire reason he's on this podcast. And we've already heard so many good stories, and we haven't even made it to
I
that
could
part
sit
of his
here and
life
listen
yet.
to more of the military stories all day.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to have to split this into a two-parter. I don't think it'll be any more than that,
No.
though I think we could definitely have
We
Mark
could.
back. Yeah.
If we wanted to, we could. But I think we're going to knock this down in the next episode. If you guys want to tune back in, we'll wrap up with Mark and all his stories about the boat and Hatteras and coming into Beaufort. And I know he's got some cool stories. I don't want to give too much away, but if you guys tune in for that in the next episode.
And we also want to thank all of our local sponsors that made this show happen. People like Above It All Studios, Zion Consulting Group, Lookout Adventures, and Island Traders.
Yeah, we've got links to all their websites and directions to their shops if you're not aware of everything. Without these guys, we couldn't do what we're doing. So we want to thank them guys for supporting us and doing everything they can to help us out.
Absolutely. It's a big thank you to all of our sponsors, and please feel free to visit the website if you would like to inquire about becoming a sponsor yourself. In the meantime, if you have any questions, any feedback about the show, or any concerns about the show itself, about Opie and I, our well-being, anything like that.
Make sure we're doing okay between now and then.
Yeah.
Feel free to check out the website. It's thelookoutcookout.com. You can go there. We've got links to all of our Facebook or Twitter.
And also,
links to everything.
and you can also email us at email@thelookoutcookout.com. You can send any suggestions or questions through there. If you have an idea of who we should talk to on an episode of the show, please feel free to send it in through there.
If there's somebody we haven't covered, make sure we know about it. We've got to know what you guys are into, what you guys are digging on, maybe what you're not digging on. So just hit us up, check us out. Tell all your friends, tell all your enemies, tell your mama, tell somebody. Till next time, this is Opie.
This is Levi.
Thanks for stopping by. Look out, Cookout, guys. We'll see you next time.